Hello everyone, I'm Neil Smith and we welcome you to our second episode for 2021 of our Enhancing Safety and Controlling Doors series. This is dual certification unravelled. We have an important topic to discuss this episode, and that's testing and certification of multi-purpose doors, or what's known as dual testing and dual certification. After our webinar in March on the draft building safety bill, we asked people what they wanted to see on the next webinar, and this topic was put forward by attendees. It's to be noted that this is general advice. It's for awareness only and is not specific advice for your circumstances. We would welcome you to contact us directly, discuss specific projects, and please remain muted, to reduce noise, and be free to send questions via the Zoom chat facility. And we have experienced panel with us today, all of which have been involved in dual testing and dual certification. So firstly, we'd like to just ask the question, why have a dual certificated or dual tested door? In any case, apartment entrance doors, maybe not the most exciting topic, but they're an important part of building safety, especially in high-risk buildings. And from feedback, many persons misunderstand dual certification, or say they find it a foggy area. So when taking on a new responsibility, such as a principal designer, principal contractor, building manager, or maybe you're going into acquisition of real estate, refurbishment, construction of multi-story apartments, it's really so important that we get a clear understanding of entrance door requirements and to keep up to date. So I'm now going to pass over to Neil Harrison from Falcon Panel Products, who will unpack some important points in dual testing. And we've had two questions come in. Wonder if you could answer these, Neil. First question that's come through is there more to dual certification than just fire and security? And second question, there seems to be a bit of misconception where people think this is just two tests, fire and security. Is this the case? And can you help bring some clarity on this, Neil?
Hi, thanks, Neil. I think those two questions are covered with what we're going through here. First of all, dual certification isn't as complicated as many believe. In a lot of ways, it's actually a simplification. It's a term used to describe an initiative introduced from Secure by Design in October 2017, which was in the wake of the tragedy at Grenfell Tower. The announcement made in basic form was that for Secure by Design projects, doors requiring performance for both fire and security must hold certification for both aspects by the same body. So I think the important definition here is certification, which ensures that not only a valid set of tests to the appropriate standards have been done, but also the manufacturers subjecting themselves to regular factory visits, FPC auditing, and audit testing. So for both aspects, but from the security side alone, this means that the manufacturer must conduct at least one security test annually to ensure that the specification originally tested still performs, and that carries on year on year. More recently, Secure by Design have announced that from June 2022, certification for the resistance of passage of smoke will also be an SBD requirement. The certification bodies all appear to be working on integrating smoke performance into their doors and Doorset schemes, and I'm sure more information will follow on that. It is important when talking about smoke, it is important to note that just adding a smoke seal, whether that's combined with an intermescent or as a separate smoke seal and applying that to the Doorset, it doesn't automatically prove performance. So in brief, dual certification means that the tested specimens and certified products from them are identical, and that the components, including the seals and hardware, are consistently performing to the standards required. So now that we've established that enhanced security and resistance to fire performances are certified in a combined way. Pedestrian door sets more often than not need to comply with other requirements too. And these are often defined within the UK building regulations guidance documents or approved documents. So, for example, there may be approved document L, which may require a certain U value to demonstrate the thermal efficiency of a door set, or the approved document K, which could require the glazing within a door to meet a particular safety standard. There are many more too, and those requirements all change depending on the use of the door set and, more importantly, the use of the building. The important thing to note is that when a designer or specifier requires all of these elements, then it is for a reason, and they need to be fulfilled in some way. There isn't a hierarchy of which standard is more important than another one, and I think the best way of dealing with this is by working collaboratively with designers, manufacturers, systems houses and certification bodies to find a solution for, even given the more recent announcement on smoke, I thought I'd just quickly run through how this ties in with resistance to fire for both UK national and European standards. So for UK national standards, there is the fire test standard is generally BS 476 part 22, and the smoke standard is BS 476 part 31.1. Once you've conducted a successful fire and smoke test, which are two completely different test standards, you get there's a prefix of FD before the duration. So for fire, you'd have FD30 or FD60 or FD90 and so on. And then a suffix of S if you have a successful smoke test. So combine those together, you can have FD30S, FD60S, and FD90S. Classification to European standards is different. There is a formal process for classifying for fire and smoke standards, and that's in accordance with the SEN 13501 Part 2. So if you've conducted a test to the European standard, BSEN 1634 Part 1, depending on how you've tested it and what the performance criteria is, you would have an E or an EI prefix. So E would mean integrity, and I after the E would mean insulation. So you could have E30, EI30, E60, and EI60. For the smoke standard, it's 1634 Part 3, and that has a suffix of SA or S200. SA is in relation to cold smoke. S200 is in relation to smoke resistance at 200 degrees. Just doing those tests doesn't mean that your door set is E30 SA or EI60 S200 or anything like that. From those test reports, you have to go and get them formally classified in accordance with BSEN 13501 Part 2. So there would be a separate report for that. Okay. Enhanced security certification actually there's more than just a security test. So everyone's aware of PAS 24, the publicly available specification for security, and that's the base level security test. There isn't different grades. There is a pass or a fail. That's it. There are other security standards which can be adhered to be part of which recognised by Secure by Design. That includes the LPS 1175 and Warrington Fire one, which is STS 202. Very similar. There is different levels of security that you can get depending on how your test is carried out. In essence, though, they all have mechanical and manual test clauses designed to exploit potential vulnerabilities which may be present in the assembly. I'll quickly run through some of the others because I know that there's other people going to speak further on these. So you've got weather tightness, which is BS 6375 Part 1, operation and strength, BS 6375 Part 2. In that standard, there's a lot of elements from the old PAS 23 standard as well, and additional characteristics, which is 6375 Part 3. Security certification isn't the same as just having a PAS 24 test report. So if someone's just given you a PAS 24 test report from whatever time it was, without these other parts being monitored under a certification scheme, you haven't got the same amount of, or you shouldn't have the same amount of confidence that it's being routinely tested and routinely checked. This is exactly the same for fire when you're looking at fire certification as opposed to just having the fire test report. Dual certification goes further than the minimum requirements of the building regulations, which is in the end ensuring safer buildings. That's all I've got, Neil.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, that's very helpful. So it's more like multi-testing, multi-certification. It's helpful. I just now going to hear from Richard Bate of Build Check. Richard, all these requirements that Neil's spoken about, please could you help us on what is mandatory requirement? Questions come through. So what's mandatory and what's enhanced, and what's the requirement for dual certification? Is it optional? Richard, could you?
Good morning, everyone. Basically, when we talk about a minimum requirement, we're talking about a building reg. So the minimum requirement for document Q, which is a building reg for England. I know there's other building regs throughout the UK for different nations like Wales and Scotland, etc. But they're pretty much on a similar plane. They're similar type of standard, and using, there's subtle nuances between them, but basically this is just a template to explain how it really works. So first of all, document Q compliance, you need a PAS 24 test. That's it. You need a report from a test house, a UCAS or equivalent test house, to prove that your product meets the requirements. Okay, and document Q only talks about new build dwellings. It doesn't talk about anything else at the moment. That may change, but that's your minimum requirement. Fire, Doorsets, it's absolutely fine. You need a test to prove that your product can meet the requirements. It's just a test, again, from a UCAS establishment or equivalent, to prove that your test meets that requirement. And then you can go to a building control officer and say, you know, for a certain construction or a certain situation, that door set works. And again, for smoke, it's exactly the same principle. You just need a test from a test laboratory. It's nothing to do with certification. There's no auditing involved. There's a minimum requirement to meet the building regs. It's just a test report to whatever elements you wish. So obviously we are talking about document Q or security and fire related tests, but it could be anything U values, has been mentioned previously with document L and other stuff. But basically it's just a report, nothing more, nothing less. Now that report could last for 10 years if your spec doesn't change and the standard doesn't change. It could be, you know, legal tender for you to sell your product into certain situations. So next would be, well, what's the enhanced requirements? So what tends to happen is contractually, nothing to do with building regs, although these enhanced requirements will cover you for the building regs. Contractually, or a specification comes on board, which means you have to meet it. Now, in a lot of cases for security, that would be SBD. So it exceeds the minimum requirements. It's okay for the building regs, but the reality is there is further work you have to do. So you may have to get more testing done, not just the PAS 24 on its own. The PAS 24 that you got for building regs compliance with document Q is fine. It still contributes, or it's still perfectly acceptable to go for your certification. But the reality is you need other tests, which has been highlighted earlier. You need a weather test and other tests, fit for purpose tests like cycling. But the key change is that you will be audited. Someone will come to your factory, they will check your quality systems. They will also check that your specification of your product that you have had tested is what you're making, and also that it leaves the factory correctly in the right way with correct labeling, or it's just a further check on your production to make sure you're making what you claim. And also you'll have audit testing. So ongoing, you will be either requested to supply a sample, or a sample will be picked off your production line to establish that that product, when tested to the same standards, still works. Things can happen. You could have a lock that is exactly the same code, but has been machined slightly differently, and it starts to fail. So there is a check of your production, and not only through an audit, but also through a physical test. And if we move on then, what's the enhanced requirements? Well, it's very similar for fire, basically. You do a fire door, have a test done, but that test then can be used by a certification scheme to allow them to write you a scope of accreditation, basically to say your doors are being made as you claim they are. So that's a FPC again. You know, you're looking at the quality system, checking that that is giving you enough information, and then the product goes out the door accredited. Someone has signed off that you're doing what you should do. Again, there'll be audit testing and annual auditing, and smoke leakage, as someone alluded to earlier. It's always been there in document B. It's never been out of, you know, the fire regulations, but it's only used in certain times in certain situations. But now certification schemes, because of what SBD have, you know, implemented, they want this part of the package, are now looking at schemes to encompass the smoke leakage into the overall picture, basically. So you have a complete package of fire, smoke and security as one. Okay, but these are enhanced schemes, and on their own, and the initial testing you do for document L compliance, they're perfectly valid within their own right. You might have a certification scheme which runs a fire, and on the other side you have another certification that runs security. They're both all correct, but the problem comes is when we move on to dual certification, basically. So when we get to dual certification, we are coming across issues, and the main issues are this: you have a security test done, you have a fire test done, and then you have a smoke leakage test done. They may all be slightly different in spec, and what has been happening is people are trying to encompass all these three tests into one identical specimen, and it's almost like Trigger's broom. The reality is, oh, it's the same broom, but it's got 3 different heads and 14 different handles. It's the same with the door. It's the same door, except the hinges aren't quite right. We haven't really tested them, and the door's bigger than we'd ever normally sell, but we haven't had it tested. The reality is, fire, smoke, and security actually work against each other as a test or a specification. Okay, so if you have, you know, a test done for fire, that fire door probably won't pass the PAS 24 because it's not designed to. So what we're leading to is we're trying to have a door that has gone through all these tests, okay, that works for all. It may be a compromise, it may not be the perfect door, but it passed all the individual tests, an identical door. And that could be frames identical, you know, the door blank, the leaf is identical, the hardware, the size and the seals, you know. And we're asked all the time, well, can you substitute? And it's like, well, you can't substitute. There's no, if you put a handle, I'll just change this handle. Well, it might be all right for fire, but that handle may not work with the security test. We might get in. Even if you use the same locks and the same US cylinder, you'll probably still get in unless you've tested it physically. So, you know, you can't really substitute anything. You have to keep your remit very close for all 3 tests. And the final point I would make is also, as I said earlier, you might have a certification body who does fire, and that's perfectly legitimate, or a test for fire. You have a certification body that does security. What SBD are asking now is that one product certification body will have all those tests under all those certifications in one place. So they have one test reports, or a selection of reports that are looked at by the certification body and checked. And that one certification body then will check the factory to check all that identical door is being made exactly the same for the 3 elements: fire, smoke, and security. And that has to come from one certification body. So that is the important difference from what we've been doing previously, is all the specimen has to be identical. You have to have every test done, and the certification has to go through one certification body.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for unpacking that so clearly. And it's very interesting what you say about the smoke always being there, and what might develop in the coming months on that. So yeah, I'm just going to now hear from Andy Davis of Halspan, who is going to help us on why this is all so important. Andy, with 2 questions here. As a door manufacturer starting out in dual certification, where would you start? And another question, if you don't mind, is how would you ensure a specification is relevant to a building, and how maybe a door manufacturer can give pushback, if that's the right word, if they find that specification isn't achievable or it's unnecessary.
Sorry, Neil, I lost the first question then. I had a bit of a...
Sorry. Yeah, it was just on the whether a door manufacturer starting out in dual testing for the first time, or starting, where would they start from?
Well, first of all, they've got to kind of start from the end, if you like. So they've got to know where they want to be with a particular product. So think at the end and then work back. So is the product which you're looking to market and looking to test, is it fit for purpose? Does it fulfill the design brief? So it's important these days that we come away from this door assembly mentality where we're grabbing a door leaf from here with a lock from here. Yes, they may have all been independently tested in the past, but we come to more of a door set mentality from a single source, which puts all of these elements together and tests the same design to the required standards in one episode, if you like. So you go away, you do your fire testing, you go away, you do your security testing, you do your 6375 testing, all on the same design, which is produced at the same factory to the same specification. So it's very important, because the test evidence which is generated from this is then pretty rock solid. It's robust. It can't be brought into question, because what you're actually putting onto the market is what you've tested. And it's absolutely clear that the door set is then fit for purpose. So as I say, you need to get to the end point and work backwards in terms of testing and design. So the design specification for fire testing has got to be identical as security. As Richard touched on, some security features can compromise fire resistance. So a good example is a big lever handle with a massive steel backplate, for example. That is going to be fantastic in security testing, because they're not going to be able to get to the cylinder, they're not going to be able to breach the lock. But in fire resistance testing, you're putting a big lump of steel into a furnace there, and that's not going to do too well. So you've got to consider what works well in fire and what works well in security. And is there a middle ground? Are the products on the market which work quite well for both disciplines? So the government advice note 16.5 on the slide states that this advice note primarily concentrates on fire safety. However, front doors should also meet security requirements set out in approved document Q. So you've got two approved documents to consider. You've got to satisfy approved document B for fire safety, and you've got to satisfy approved document Q for safety. And again, as Richard pointed out, both documents ask for very different things a lot of the time. So that you've got to find that middle ground and ensure that you're getting a design that works to cover both documents. There's also the other considerations to think about too. So the requirements for door sets in other parts of building regs. So that's approved document E, acoustics. So it may be that you're doing an apartment entrance door, but you need, say, 32 dB acoustic performance. You've got to bring that into the design as well. Part L for conservation of fuel and power. It may be that you need to achieve a 1.8 U value for your whole assembly. So again, there's thermal calculations need to be carried out. And part M is your clear opening big enough. The bigger the door set for both fire and security, the more onerous the test is. So you need to make sure that you're meeting all three of those critical approved documents. And as I touched on at the start, the door sets must meet all relevant requirements in one package, i.e. the same specification, and in, I would imagine, most cases, the same supplier. So single source mentality is at the key. It's the key element to good dual certification door sets.
That's good, very good. Could you just say something on if a door manufacturer feels that a specification isn't achievable, how is it advisable to communicate back to the client or architect, or how would you?
Oh, absolutely, Neil. Yes, because if there's a certain element which is going to fail one or another or both of the fire and security testing aspects, then they need to communicate that to the customer as to why it won't work. You've got to
Yeah.
look at the design, point out the flaws to the customer, and then potentially provide alternative specifications and suggestions. As pretty much all of us know in this room, the architect in particular is mainly concerned with design intent and how to fulfill that design intent, be that fire, security and aesthetics indeed. A lot of the time, in my experience, as long as you're not changing the look of the door, the appearance of the door, and all of the functionality is maintained, then the actual essential ingredients can be amended to something which will be compliant.
That's very helpful, Andy. I like what you said about starting with the end in mind.
That's key.
Good.
Because, yeah, you need to make sure that you're fulfilling all aspects of your design brief with your product and offering as many options as you possibly can within that design.
Very good. Thank you, Andy. Sometimes we find specification could be just a copy and paste. So maybe not relevant today. So that's very good. So just to drill down and give pushback when needed. Our next speaker is Dave Timpson of Eurobond Doors. Dave, as a door manufacturer yourself, what do door manufacturers need to be aware of when dual testing, and how do they approach that? And can you give us help on levels of security testing? I think there's like low levels and high levels of security, and how that all comes into it.
Yeah, thank you, Neil, and really just expanding on what Andy said. Really, I'll try to give a brief insight into how to approach testing of door sets from a manufacturer's view. As a steel door set manufacturer, my specialism is door sets, and that is the context that the information I present will be mainly based upon. And door sets, as Andy said, are so relevant to certification, and particularly when it comes to dual certification, to ensure that the levels of conformance are met. So firstly, what is a door set? There's various definitions out there on approved documents that have been mentioned, trade body standards. But the most appropriate, I feel, is the definition of the window and doors terminology standard, which is a complete unit consisting of a door frame and a door leaf or leaves supplied with all essential parts from a single source. And I think that's a very clear definition of a door set, and it ensures that certification is key. So where do we start when we're looking, when you're entering the whole certification area? First, we need to determine the performance functions you wish to meet. For dual certification, as mentioned, we're looking at primarily security and fire resistance with the addition of smoke and some of the physical requirements. When you have established the performance, you need to identify the appropriate test and certification facilities that you're going to use. As Richard Bay mentioned previously, although manufacturers can test products to meet minimum compliance to building regulations, membership to a certification scheme provides the added assurance of consistent product performance through the controls of factory production control, inspections, and periodic sample test auditing. To comply with requirements as secured by design, manufacturers must submit the product range you're looking to cover for certification by an independent third-party UCAS accredited body. It's worth noting at this point that secured by design is an accreditation scheme for the police preferred specification, does not actually undertake any of the testing themselves. Okay, as a manufacturer, when you are first looking to certify your products, you've got various considerations, things you may need to consider prior to testing. You want to look at what range of door sets, the product family you wish to cover. So the scope of product variations, which can be quite vast. So what configuration your doors are going to be? Are they going to be singles, double door sets? Are they going to include fan lights, side screens? You need to think about the operation of the door. Is it a single swing door or a double swing door? You need to look at what dimensions you're trying to achieve, your max minimum dimensions for where you're marketing that door, and what materials you're going to include in the manufacture of this door, the frame, the leaf, and the facings and core materials. Are you going to include vision panels, and what size vision panels you require? And their positioning in the door is all relevant to the testing that you'll be looking to do. And what hardware you need to use, which is quite important when we're looking at the security element as well. So are they going to be all latch doors, or is there a requirement for unlatched doors in certain circumstances? And also, it's very important that you understand, where the doors are going to be installed. What the supporting structure will be. Will they be installed into solid construction, a flexible construction, or an associated product? And finally, really, you need to determine what the target performance you're looking to achieve. After you've considered your scope, you need to determine what standards are the most appropriate for the door type, for its function and its application. This can be a daunting task with a complex web of details for even a relative standard product range. So it's so important to engage at an early stage with the testing and certification body that you're looking to use, who can provide informative advice on the number of variations that will need to be covered under the test evidence. And like I say, by doing this, you can really minimize the number of tests required to provide the widest possible scope for the range of doors covered under the certification. The number of tests necessary can become significant when looking at door families. And you also need to consider that doors with insulated cores may need to be tested in both inward and outward opening directions. It's also possible to test multiple numbers of single door sets in a single test when the size of the door and the testing furnace permits. And finally, when we talk about certification, and one of the previous speakers mentioned, don't forget to factor in that your test doors will need to be sample audited by the test body during their manufacture prior to the test to qualify for certification. And you need to allow enough time to coordinate the test body's attendance to your factory to witness the build of the test doors. So, as I said, there's a busy presentation sheet there, which is primarily a reference sheet, just listing some of the relevant standards when we're talking about dual certification for security, fire, including smoke, and some of the physical properties. All right.
Add them to the Q&A. Yeah, Dave, that's very helpful. Can see a lot of questions coming through, which we'll try and answer at the end. But that's very helpful. Hearing from you on the coal face there as a door manufacturer.
Thank you.
So now we'll be hearing from our guest speaker, Alfie Hosker of the Police Secured by Design scheme. Alfie, please tell us your story and unpack what the scheme is all about.
Thanks, Neil. Morning, everyone, and thanks to the rest of the panel. I think I'll start off by just explaining what Secure by Design is, where it came from, and the fact that we represent the UK Police Service. The sort of security standards briefly, because as was shown previously, there are a lot out there, but don't get frightened by it. There's help that can be gained by looking at Secure by Design. What is dual certification? I know the rest of the panel's already spoken about it, but just to give our view of why we looked at it and where it came from, and possibly where we're going in the journey and the reasons for that, and as already explained earlier, the other performance characteristics. So yeah, if we could move on, that would be great. Just to give some background for those that don't know anything about Secure by Design. Secure by Design sits under the umbrella of Police Crime Prevention Initiatives, which runs 9 initiatives across a variety of different crime prevention with the aim of preventing harm, crimes, whatever that would be, antisocial behaviour. And we have things such as car parks, cyber crime, national business crime, all, as I've said, representing the UK Police Service to reduce the impact out there, of which each and every one of the panel are assisting us with in some form or another. Move on, please, Neil. Thank you. As I've said, just to give you an overview, over 30 years, we are police-owned. Though we're a non-for-profit private company, all the money is raised by our members and fired back into the police service. We actually sit under the London Mayor's office, and the actual board is made up of chief constables. So you can see through it, though it's a business, it's there to prevent crime. And this is where it came from. 30 years ago, there were a couple of police officers that were really worried about the level of burglaries. There was probably nearly 2 million burglaries a year. Some of you may remember Richard May, to be fair, in his capacity as a body, and some of the lock manufacturers, one in 6 keys had fit a door. The panels would be easily kicked through. So we decided to work with these bodies to come up with a standard of which, to be fair, past 2016 that we've got now was born all those years ago. So that's where it started to come from. And I think, forgive me, it may have been Andy or one of the other panel members quite rightly alludes to the fact that we don't test and certify the products. In days gone by, someone like me will put my size 10 police boots on and go and kick 7 bells out of a door and write a witness statement and say, yeah, that's okay. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, fortunately, those days are long gone, and we work with the experts. So, for example, the manufacturers, Richard, for example, that's Bill Check, whether it's LPCB, the BSI, and use properly qualified test engineers and experts who can say, yes, this door is fit for purpose, for example. Not that we're talking about doors primarily today and dual certification, but across a range of other products. So, as I said, the ethos and the mission of Secure by Design came as a matter to try and assist the police service with industry and create products and services that reduce crime and protect people from harm. So, if we can move on, please, Neil, that would be great. So I put this on, and we can see, to be fair, the police, crime, to be fair, they've been trying to sort it out for years, over 2,000 years, and we're still trying to sort it out. And good old Lucius, to be fair, philosopher and statesman, all this time ago actually makes reference to it. So, yeah, we're still getting it wrong now, even when they told us that there were issues back then. So we're still trying to do it, which Secure by Design and PCPI tries to do, because the days of Dixon and Doc Green are long gone. And the issue is expecting the police to go out and be on the streets. Yes, is one facet, but if we can design it out in the first place and have industry and the likes of the certification bodies test engineers, architects, all looking to design it out at the build stage, to be fair, or refurbishment stage, it has a knock-on effect and reduces opportunity and keeps people safe. Thanks, Neil. So, where did dual certification come from? Or should I say, start with security standards? I'll start with security standards, and I don't want to sort of overcomplicate it, but in essence, it depends on where your development is or what the security application is. So if it's a normal residence, a basic security standard would be that the police sort of accept is past 2016 for that or a low-level commercial capacity. And as the security risk starts to increase, for example, a jewellers, or it may be a retail premises, we have other standards that are more robustly tested and have more significant tool attack regimes in them, and quite rightly so. So, for example, LPCB 1175, for example, SR2 and 3 and above, or it could be STS 202, BR1, BR2, BR3. Those start to add more severe security testing. So, as I said, I don't want to get bogged down on that. If you are interested, we have got various guides on the Secure by Design website under guidance that actually show what application these can work in. And in fairness, PCPI or Secure by Design is assisted by about 200 what are called design and out crime officers that provide advice and security on new builds and refurbishments within planning or wherever that would be, that can also guide you. So moving forward, where did dual certification come from? And I get it. Looking back now, dual certification, we didn't really, if I'm honest with you, we were fairly blinkered. And as I said, we're not test engineers because as has been quite rightly pointed out by the panel and you as the audience will know, there are a great deal of performance characteristics on a door. In fairness, we were just referring, as we've spoken about, security and fire performance. Hindsight, maybe I should have called it something else. And in the future, maybe called something else, possibly. But it came about just primarily, Secure by Design doesn't take members on. We go back and we have a look at new builds. And unfortunately, because of what happened at Grenfell, we were already looking at this. We were called in to start to have a look at a number of developments that had so-called fire doors on them or security doors. And when we started to examine these with some of our colleagues from some of the other cert bodies, it became clear that those doors weren't fit for purpose. And as has already been highlighted by the likes of Richard and Andy and the rest of the panel, it's a lack of understanding or people thinking that, wait a minute, I've got a certificate for security, I've got a certificate for fire, that's all right, I can mix and match. Well, actually, no, it isn't. And what happens is, by altering any of those characteristics can have a major impact on the performance of that product. So an example would be, one of the main examples we found on our investigation, and we started looking at this back in 2017, we've been asking for dual certification, is say a door closer. So a door closer, for example, on a security application may be fixed on top. On the fire door, it may be embedded for whatever reason on the door, so it's internally configured. Well, if you start mixing and matching and you chip out that door closer on a security door, it's going to make the security door weaker. Alternatively, there may be issues with the glazing, for example. And as I say, I'm not a fire expert. The experts are the other speakers that you've listened to. But my understanding is it could be the shape of the glazing. So, well, I can have full glazing in here, or I can have a square glazing in here. Well, actually, no, that can have an impact on the temperature. So we looked at it, and that's why we went for what we call dual certification, has already been explained, i.e. everything is on one document, so it limits confusion. There can be no confusion. That door, to be fair, it does what it says on the tin, for example, and lists all the component parts and configurations that make it up. And that's why, and I've got to stress from a police secure by design point of view, why we went down that route, to give us comfort that the door was the same door that was being installed. What I have got to say is, because there was some questions, in fairness, and we're not sort of naive enough to say that everything can be certificated. We understand there'll be bespoke applications. And what we actually advise in our documentation is you speak, as has already been alluded to, you speak to the relevant fire specialists who are on that particular scheme and come up with a partnership approach. So we understand there are issues and it can be overcome. But when we were going back to our investigations and we found out that the number of these doors weren't fit for purpose, it resulted in 300 doors or 500 doors being taken out because they weren't fit for purpose. We had another job where doors were refurbished, or there'd been a breakdown in one of the components and they'd replaced it. Well, that in itself, to be fair, it was a local authority, then made the door, in fact, not security and not fire, because the components that they'd added were no longer the same. So the point is even on refurbishments or whatever it is, you need to get the experts in to make sure that it still is fit for purpose and it's still the same door if a component breaks down. So in essence, that's why we started to look and why we went for dual certification and why Secure by Design asked for certification. As has already been alluded to, a test is a one-off test that demonstrates that that door does that today. That's no good to the police. I have got to stress, when anyone else wants to accept, that's a matter for them, we're happy for that. But for police approval, it's got to be third-party certification, which gives us comfort, as long as it's fabricated right and installed correctly, that that same door is the same today, tomorrow, next week, next year, as long as it's in line with the audit process and its factory production, etc., etc. So that gives us comfort within there.
Very good.
Sorry, Neil.
That's very, very good. Powerful message.
Yeah, thanks, mate. What I was going to say is from our side, is we're now looking at smoke leakage, and hindsight's a good thing. Maybe we should have had a look at this sort of years ago, but from a police perspective or a Secure by Design perspective, though we are a business, we can't just put things down. We look at all crime types from cyber to this, and none of us are real experts. We work with industry to try and make things safe. So going forward, yes, we're looking at smoke leakage. Yes, I've spoken to all the cert bodies from BSI, Richard, spoken to BM Trada, LPCB, in the hope of going forward. And maybe in the future, who knows, the cert bodies will produce some form of scheme that is easily readable by people out there and includes all performance where possible. One of the issues we've got, and let's be clear, the police understand that this is costly. We don't say this for a laugh. We don't sort of like say, you know what, industry, go and find this. But unfortunately, we ask for it because evidence has shown us that test reports are failing a lot of the time. And this is the only way it gives us comfort. If we could find a better way that was cheaper, we would go that way. It's just, this gives us the best chance of ensuring that the products are fit for purpose. So from our side, certification will generally always be for police. Preferred specification, the way forward, and hopefully I've given you a little bit of an insight into Secure by Design and why we've asked for it, Neil.
Yeah, no, you've given it us. Thanks for unpacking all that. I think it's fantastic, the awareness that SBD is doing. It's really appreciated by the industry. It seems almost ironic that we've got police on here talking about fire. It's like, oh, we need help with fire, let's ring the police. but it's that working together is really good. It's
well, I think it goes hand in hand, Neil.
One thing, yeah.
It goes hand in hand, and as I've said, look, we know it's grief for the industry, and we know, and as I've said, but without this partnership approach and people buying into it, let's be right about it. So smoke that we're looking at now, there's more people get killed by smoke than there is by the actual fire.
Yeah, we learned that at a very young age, don't we, at school?
Yes, some of the building regs don't work, and behind the scenes, we're trying to link and work with MCHLG to try and get a unified approach to make it easier for the specifiers. It's difficult, I know, but I've got to say, without all the panel members and the audience working towards this, hey, things would be worse off.
That's good.
All the answers, but we're trying.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Alfie, and thanks for coming on today. That just leaves us at the end of the seminar. We are going to have a Q&A session, but I just wanted to say a couple of things on UKCA mark Doorsets and the cost. Second thing was the cost of all this. dual testing that Alfie's just alluded to, cost of certification too, which is one of the recent webinars. It was a BSI webinar I was on, and speaking to some experts after that, we admit it's, I mean, I wasn't a speaker at the BSI webinar, I was just listening in, but speaking to experts since then, it's challenging times we're in with so much activity going on. For example, the draft building safety bill is just one thing, and it's very probable we'll have new legislation on the way. So dual testing and certification, after speaking with dozens of architectural ironmongers, hardware suppliers, door manufacturers, there's so much confusion around dual testing and dual certification. I'm just talking with a very well established door manufacturer who've done their past 24 testing and got third-party certification for security, and then fire testing, they've got security from another body. But yeah, this the next step, they need to get all that test evidence into one summary report and one dual certificate. So there is benefits in being listed on the SBD website, but it all costs money for the door manufacturer. People don't want the cost of another audit, another certification scheme, but there are ways of negotiating, sitting down, communicating, as has been said. So I just wanted to say something about UK CA marking. The UK CA mark is a legal requirement, and it covers external door sets. It includes fire. As we've said, SBD is voluntary; it's not a legal requirement. But it seems that the draft building safety bill is likely to follow the UKCA marking route, make all internal and external door sets require testing and certification under CPR, or Construction Products Regulation. So, and this in turn requires single certificate from a UK approved body. The approved body is responsible for gathering the evidence, conducting tests, and issuing those certificates. So it also requires regular factory production control visits and mirror schemes like the BSI kite mark scheme, for example. So I understand the bigger picture, maybe the bigger issues include the acceptance or otherwise of global assessments, where a competent engineer might be assessing, making a judgment to extend the scope of a certificate, but without adding any extra testing. So this has occurred several times, and it's sort of moving further and further away from testing. My second point is just just to say on UKCA marking, it doesn't include burglar resistance. So it's not, you wouldn't include the security element in your DOP for UKCA marked door sets. That may change, and I know experts are having discussions with the government on that. So my second point is cost of multi-testing, multi-certification. I'd just like to ask the question, are fire door sets at this level, do we regard them as a commodity? Does it come down to price? If we went parachuting this afternoon as a group, would we ask for a discount before we jumped out that plane? And would we accept a parachute that's only been tested for strength, but it's not been tested for the release mechanism? So it's just the cost of getting all this certification. I've just got a fact on cost cutting and value engineering. By November 2019, the Grenfell Tower inquiry had cost the taxpayer at least £40 million. And that's more than 100 times the savings made by swapping the fire retardant cladding, and 100 more times. It's an extreme example, I know, but the principles there. You know, in practice, sometimes cheap doesn't it equals a high cost in the long run. The other thing I just wanted to say is we're all here today to save and protect lives. Essentially, can we really put a price on that protection of life? So just to communicate with door manufacturers, if a door manufacturer isn't putting up the prices on a past 24 door set after the Grenfell tragedy, and we're expecting Doorsets to be what they were pre-Grenfell in cost, I would seriously be wary of suppliers not putting up the price, especially if they've done a lot of dual testing. Just have that conversation. Door manufacturers would encourage what we call amortization. That is where the cost of the testing has to be put onto the product over a period of years. And Rutland have got a amortization tool for door manufacturers, which some door manufacturers are finding beneficial. We're happy to share that. So just in summary then, the key takeaways, Rhonda, if you could get a slide up. We're the key takeaways from today, the importance of smoke control, as Alfie stressed, and to start with the end in mind, and then to build in into your budget the safety, the cost of safety. Maybe housing associations approaching March 31st in 2022, have a serious sit down with your suppliers. Are they amortizing? Are they putting in all the costs of this extra safety, both security, fire, and all the multiple testing that's going on? So that's the end of this webinar. If you want to stay on for the Q&A session, you're welcome, and we'll move on with that. So there's been some more questions coming through during the webinar, which is fantastic. We'll try and get through these. I think we'll have to limit it to about 20 questions, but the first question, I can see a number of hardware products listed on the SBD website. Can a multi-point lock or any item of hardware be called past 24 tested on a manufacturer's data sheet? So if it's listed on a data sheet as SBD approved, if that's put on a door set, does it make the door set SBD approved? And it's a very similar question. We have a client wanting advice on how to upgrade their existing fire doors to meet SBD. If we suggest retrofit locks from suppliers on the SBD website, will this make their doors dual fire and security compliant? I don't know whether someone could answer both those questions. Dave, could you answer those questions as a GAI?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Well, basically the answer is no. It's the door set that is certified. A standard door doesn't amazingly become a security door just because an approved security lock is fitted. However, within a certification scheme, an approved listed lock may be interchanged from a certified door to another certified door if it is the same lock type and its fitting does not affect the construction of the door. The second question, I think you said about a fire door, having a lock fitted. This is more concerning on there. And again, the answer is no. And to emphasize the message of the day, if you want a dual certified door, then you need a tested and certified door set. Unfortunately, an existing door cannot become dual certified by adding hardware. More importantly, any alterations to the fire door, its existing construction, can affect both its fire performance and also nullify the door's certification.
That's good. Thanks, Dave. Alfie, would you like to add anything there, or does that cover it?
Yeah, in terms of SBD listings, yeah, we must have the relevant reports. So the lock must either meet TS 007, for example, or it must have the relevant sort of test reports to go with it before it can be listed, in fairness, or highlighted as a critical component within a particular scope of certification. Each one's dealt on its own merits, but no, it can't be listed just to say, oh, without the relevant testing and certification.
That's good. Thanks, Alfie. The next question we've got is, looks like it's from a end user, as in a housing association. And does maintenance of our fire and security doors form part of dual certification? For example, what checks should we be making on our doors? Is maintenance of doors part of the compliance? Dave, could you answer that one as well?
Yeah, well, I keep on the no, on the negative answers here, but no, dual certification, it's an assurance that the product is designed, tested and certified to meet the prescribed performance of the door. What happens to the door when the building becomes occupied under the regulatory reform order, fire safety order, that becomes a responsibility of the responsible person, who is generally the landlord or the building operator or the owner of the building. Currently a hot topic with the ongoing Grenville inquiry, and what actions actually follow that will be seen. BS 9999, the Code of Practice for Fire Safety in the Design and Management and Use of Buildings, that guidance document suggests a 6-monthly inspection of fire doors, but this could possibly be reduced. Under the fire safety order, it's important to determine the frequency of inspection and maintenance as an outcome of your fire risk assessment. A door that is infrequently used, such as a riser door, will inherently require less maintenance than a door that is subjected to frequent heavy use or even misuse, such as let's say a school corridor door that may require a monthly or even a weekly inspection. So in short, to answer that question, Neil, ultimately the maintenance falls under the responsible person.
Thank you, Dave. That's very helpful. The next question, maybe one for you, Andy, is on, we maybe covered it already, but as a door manufacturer, we're planning dual testing. What test standards do I have to budget for? Is there any sort of, would you have any ballpark figures as well? But it's, I think it's been covered, but if you could just say something to this door manufacturer.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to comment too heavily on the commercial side of it, Neil, to be honest, because test fees vary from lab to lab, as you know. But it depends what dual testing you want to carry out. Do you want to carry out the minimum requirement, so compliance with approved document Q and B? If so, then you'll need dual orientation fire testing and PAS 24 testing as a minimum. If you want to go that bit further, and I would implore everybody to do so and meet the SBD requirements, then alongside the fire and PAS 24 tests, you would need to carry out smoke testing and preferably to EN 1634 Part 3. and operational testing to BS 6375 parts 2 and 3. If you've got an external door, which is going to be exposed to the elements, and you also need to carry out weather tightness testing in accordance with BS 6375 part 1 to achieve classification. So that would be the recommendation, that you go the whole hog while you're doing it, and meet the enhanced standard. Just doing the mandatory testing is going to be of limited use going forward, and you sort of want to future-proof your design to make sure that you're up to date with all the latest test standards, and you'll then be able to apply that design to dual certification and indeed schemes like Secure by Design.
That's good advice, and it's again thinking from the end. What's the end goal? As we're saying earlier, that's helpful, Andy. The next question: out of all the standards, which standard would we regard as the most important? I mean, U rating, security, fire, smoke. Is there an order of importance? If a door manufacturer spec won't meet everything, didn't say who this one's from, but is that Neil Harrison? Could you answer that question?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, there isn't a hierarchy. There's a door set, door assembly. It has a set of performance criteria in order to make it viable to be used in the building. Some parts like fire and security can be certified, and some can't. So whatever the performance criteria laid out in the specification, that needs to be accommodated. That's it.
Good. Thank you, Neil. Next question is, we think we have a good arsenal of fire and security test evidence. What's the steps to third-party certification? Can this be unravelled, please? Richard, can you help us from?
Yeah, so obviously the testing is very important, testing evidence reports. The first thing we would do is we do a technical review of the test evidence we provided. And then once that is satisfactory, we would then process through our own quote, etc., for our own in-house systems. And we would then go either to do a pre-audit if the client's not sure what information they need, or go straight to an audit on site. Once we're on site, we would basically go through the process of looking at the FPC, looking at all their procedures and looking at the product. And then we would have a report at the end of that, which would highlight if there's any issues that we feel aren't satisfactory. Then the client would then respond to those by correspondence. We wouldn't necessarily have to have another visit. And from that correspondence, if he clears the non-conformities that we've raised, then obviously we would then accept those. They would go through to our certification director, who is totally independent of any of the testing that had been done or the audit itself, and they would sign it off, and you'd get your scope of accreditation after that. So it's quite a simple process, but it's staged, and sometimes people like a pre-assessment audit just to figure out where they are, basically, and all, because you don't want to have a full audit and find there's so much wrong with it that it sort of means you're going to have problems, or don't have the audit at all if you don't have enough test evidence to begin with. If you haven't got the right test evidence, even if you think you have, there's no point progressing. You need to solve that first.
That's good. Thank you, Richard. I wonder if Alfie could answer this next one. Can I ask what the correct spelling of dual, D-U-E-L, certification is? I've seen it spelt both ways.
It's the one with the A.
A, brilliant. Nice, simple answer. Thank you. Moving swiftly on. We're buying from a door manufacturer who has the fire test evidence and past 24 test evidence. I've even witnessed some of the tests. How will it benefit us and our clients to have dual certification on top of this? Neil, could you help in this question?
Yeah, like I said before, you've been to see some past 24 tests, and you've been to see some fire tests. It's really, that's a minimum requirement. You've got a fire test report. You could probably satisfy approved document B or approved document Q, both. However, it doesn't meet the secure by design requirement because there isn't third-party certification on top of that.
Thank you.
Certification should give you additional confidence.
Yeah, that's good. Clear. Thank you, Neil. Next question. How do I cover dual certification testing program? Sorry if we're repeating ourselves a bit here, but there's another question. Maybe put these both to Richard Bate. And what differences are there between PAS 24 Dorset and SBD?
A PAS 24 door is PAS 24 is a large document containing certification and referencing other testing. But for PAS 24 door, there is a method in PAS 24, which is the security test. There's methods to how you do the security test. Basically, a PAS 24 door is simply that test on its own, and that meets document Q. A secure by design door not only, as we said before, uses the PAS 24 door, PAS 24 test for that door, but also it has to have a weather test, it has to have cycling and other fit for purpose tests. So a lot more testing. And the SBD door then obviously has to have the audit and the audit testing undertaken by a product certification body. The other question was to do with dual certification test program. Is that right, Neil? Sorry.
Yeah, that's
okay.
right.
Yeah. So I would say be very careful and think very hard, as Andy said, before you do any testing. Is decide what you want, and actually then work through that to and actually work through it and understand what your end game is. I mean, we run R&D days as well within that. So we would run an R&D day. So you just have a rig and an engineer to quickly test your product for the security and other aspects, weather, to understand if there's going to be a problem going forward. What we tend to find is that someone will go gun ho with everything and find they've done a security test and for SBD and it fails on the weather. They haven't thought about it in any great detail. So I think look at where you want to be, and then basically maybe do some research and R&D to make sure that testing program runs smoothly, basically.
That's good, Richard. It's really helping. It's really enforcing what we said earlier. No doubt some of these questions people have found they've been answered during the webinar, but we did say we'd answer them. So next one, I think we've got Chris Houchen on the call. Regarding smoke testing, Chris, is there a smoke scheme for including smoke in a field of application?
Everyone, not really. Field of application is generally to do with fire and elements of fire. When you do a smoke test, it's a smoke leakage on a particular, on a set door design, maybe a single door leaf design, and it will give you a leakage rating of that seal when fitted into, for instance, a single leaf door. The field of application is generally applied to fire door tests, and it will cover a range of door configurations, singles, doubles, glazed, unglazed, etc., which will all have an influence on the smoke leakage rating. So at the moment, smoke leakage is a separate document or separate element from the field of application report for fire.
That's helpful. The next question here is another door manufacturer. What do I need to put into my specification for dual testing, and when do I decide my specification? I think you've covered this very well already, but Andy Davis, would you just answer that question?
No problem, Neil. Well, again, it boils down to where you want to be, starting at the end, if you like. So the need to carry out this testing is going to be dictated by demand from your customer. So what is your customer expecting to see? Does your customer need to provide a door set to the building which complies with certain standards such as secure by design? So you then need to look at the criteria. Once you've established the criteria for the door set design, you need to find products which are going to work with that design. So this is where you need to do a bit of research on previously tested products for both fire and security. Make sure that you're putting tried and tested door core in there, tried and tested lock, tried and tested closer. Try and minimize the risk, because testing is a large expense, as we know, and you don't want to be failing. Yes, sometimes you do fail and you learn from the failures, but it's nice to get it right first time, and you're not going to get it right first time if you don't do your research. I'd also implore people to seek advice from others, so speak to the test houses, the certification bodies, ourselves, Rutland, Falcon, whoever you can take advice from. Seek advice at an early stage, and they can often provide you with good little tips and pointers in terms of design and specification. Once you've got to a point where you're happy that the design and specification of your products, and let's start to call these products these door sets, because we need to be thinking of them as a holistic product that can't be chopped and changed and parts substituted willy-nilly like they used to be in the old days. We need to have the door set as a door set product. So once you've got to the point where you're happy with your design, your specification, you've maybe had it checked out by a few people in the know, they're happy, or you've accommodated certain recommendations from the test house perhaps, that's the point at which you then need to look to test, and not before. I wouldn't go into test or book dates before I've got any kind of idea about my final specification. Once you're happy with the design, then it's time to get it tested. That's good.
That's helpful, Andy. And kind of related to that question, probably another one for Chris Houchen, as sort of writing dual reports or field of applications. But this question is, what's the best test data, sampled or unsampled, to go by as a door manufacturer joining SBD? Does sampling come into this?
It's basically down to the third-party certification company and the SBD rules. As I understand it from what I think Richard said earlier, SBD is a requirement to have continuous assessment, and I would understand that would require sampling of the product prior to testing. Again, that's probably it's down to the certification body's requirements of their scheme and SBD schemes. That's good.
So again, it comes down to communication. That's helpful. Next question. We're nearly there. What will be recognised and what won't be recognised in Europe? So I suppose this door manufacturer may be supplying Republic of Ireland, maybe. And what if there's no acceptance in Europe of UK test data going forward? I don't know whether that's one for you, Dave. Have you got any research on that?
Yeah, this is a difficult question to answer. I'm not sure I'm the most qualified on the panel to respond, but I'll give my view as a manufacturer. As we currently find ourselves in the middle of a transition period without, clear information of what will be in place when the transition period finishes come 31st of December this year. As a result of Brexit, UK test and certification bodies became UK approved bodies and no longer therefore recognised as notified bodies under the CPR. And as there is currently no mutual recognition agreement between the UK and Europe, neither party, as I understand it, have to accept test evidence conducted in the other party's home country. If there's any existing test evidence that was completed prior to Brexit in the UK and has been used by an EU 27 notified body to provide certification for CE marking, then that is fine. Any UK testing that you conduct sort of post-Brexit may not be recognised by Europe and will only be eligible for the UK CA marking when this element of the whole jigsaw is complete. I think the key thing, Neil, is that manufacturers keep in touch with your test and certification bodies over the coming months as this sort of UK CA mark evolves. As a manufacturer, to answer your question there, we've sort of taken a play it safe approach, rule of thumb, whereas products, as you mentioned, we may be supplying to Ireland or Europe. We tend to now look to test in Europe, and then products that we're looking to supply into the UK, we're continuing to test at UK approved test houses. Good plan, Dave. Yep, thank you. Just next question: when security testing a fire door set, should we always fit a door closer? I've been asked this a few times, but reason we ask is when the same door set goes to the fire test, there will obviously be a door closer, but sometimes we get advised that a surface mount door closer isn't required in a past 24 test. We get told only concealed closers need to be past 24. Does this sound correct? Neil Harrison, could you unpack that?
I think from just the past 24 test, the closer does very little because the door remains shut. Concealed closers, I get why that might be included on past 24 test, because obviously it does take a lot of material out of the door. But we're not just talking, if we're not just talking about that specific past 24 test, and we're talking about the certification route through it, so cycling test and static torsion and loading and things like that, then yeah, I'd fit that closer on every specimen right the way along it. We need, when you go through the cycling test, you need to make sure that the number of cycles that you've done is with the whole assembly. Like Andy said before, we're looking at the door set as a product, not as these individual components that you can take on and off. So yeah, put the closer on, won't do any harm.
Yeah, so it's again being safe, playing safe, isn't it, like Dave was saying? Good. And the last question, we've got a couple more just come through, but what is a dual summary report? How can door manufacturers assist by providing test reports that are truly dual? And when writing summary report for dual certification, Chris Haushen, would you be able to answer that one?
Sure. Yes, I've written a few dual certification reports at the moment, and what I would emphasise is that information in those test reports is key. We've turned away more clients than we've taken on because of the two types of reports. The past 24 report and the fire test report do not contain the same level of information. From a door manufacturer's point of view, these are your reports, it's your information. If you do not supply information to the test labs, they can't put it in there. What I would suggest, traditionally fire reports have contained a bit more detailed information than the mechanical or past 24 reports. What I would say is, after you've done the first report, is send a copy of that relevant information to the other lab to say, make sure these minimum details are contained in the report. If you have drawings, construction drawings, even better, because what we need to ensure, as has been mentioned many times, is that the same type or construction of door is tested for fire as it is for past 24. And we can only go by these test reports. So you can say, well, look, it's obviously the same door, it's called XYZ, but we're looking at two test reports. And if one says it's made of hardwood of 500 density, and the other one says hardwood 650 density, we're saying, well, that's the different report, guys, different door construction. So it's up to you to make sure, as the person applying for the test, or it's your product, you own that report, to make sure that relevant information is put in there, and ask the testing laboratory to make sure that is clearly outlined. Because without the information, it then goes on the our head to make the decision: is it's the same door set? And if it's not clearly stated, we'll say, sorry, we can't guarantee it's the same door set, therefore we cannot write a dual certification report. So the one thing, if there's only one thing you remember from today, is make sure the reports are identical in construction, or in terms of identification of the construction of that door. So otherwise you may spend tens of thousands of pounds, wait months, if not years, to do all this testing, and then find out if the reports don't tally up, then it won't be able to be considered for dual certification. So that's the key element to all this, and exactly the same door is tested.
That's very good.
Okay.
And that will help ultimately saving the door manufacturer money.
Yes. Again,
quicker.
it's going back to, we've got people saying, well, go back, try and get the report changed retrospectively. And some labs have said, yes, okay, we can. Other labs have said no. So, right, okay, fire test maybe £8,000-9,000. So that's another, and it may be a lead time of 12 months to do the retest. So all this is time, money, thousands, months, years, delays in getting your product to market if you don't get it right first time. And give the information to the lab. Don't wait for the lab to sort of do all their calculations or their markup. Give them all the details.
That's very good. Thank you. Well, there are a lot more questions coming through. I realize everyone's got their busy day to get on with. And so we'll say that this brings us to the end of the webinar. We will answer all the questions that have come through and respond, and there will be a recording of this whole webinar. So with that, we come to the end of the dual certification unravelled webinar. Thank you for joining and have a good day.